In 1869, in a small town of Poland, there was a Rav who unfortunately got involved in a very bitter controversy. There were many unscrupulous people in the town who slandered him, who humiliated him, and spoke Lashon Hara about him. Now this Rav loved the people of the town, but after all the machlokes and the Lashon Hara, he had no choice, and he left the town. He left the town a broken-hearted person. He moved to another town where he became a Rav, and 2 years later he passed away. He was a very young man, but he died of a broken heart. Now, in the first town, there was a young man. He was in his early 30s, and he was just so devastated when he began to realize how the tongue of a human being could be such a lethal weapon, and how so many people had spoken Lashon Hara and said so many terrible things about this Rav that he had to leave, and eventually he died. And so this young Rav in his early 30s decided that he's going to write a book. He's going to write a sefer about how people should speak and shouldn't speak, what they could say, what they couldn't say, and he gave many, many guidelines. Now, the author of this sefer was a young man named Rabbi Sholom Meir. Rabbi Sholom Meir Kagan. Most people in the world didn't know him. And not only that, he didn't even sign his name to the sefer. He just called the sefer Chofetz Chaim. And of course, we all know that he called it Chofetz Chaim because it's based on a pasuk that David HaMelech wrote in Tehillim Lamed Daled, pasuk Yud Gimel and Yud Daled. Mi Oisha Chofetz Chaim. Who is the man who wants life? Ohev Yomim Lirois Toiv. He loves his days. He wants to see good. Nitzor L'Shoin Chomeira. Guard your tongue from speaking evil. Usfasecha Medaber Mirma. And your lips from speaking deceitfully. So this young man, Rabbi Sholom Meir, wrote the sefer because he was writing about how to speak and how not to speak. He called it Chofetz Chaim. Now, it wasn't a question of Rabbi Sholom Meir telling people not to speak. Because Rabbi Sholom Meir, as he got older and became to be known as the Chofetz Chaim, he said something in a pasuk that is right before this pasuk of Mi Yosha Chofetz Chaim. And we say it every Shabbos. The pasuk says, "L'chu vonim, go my children. Shimuli, listen to me. Yiras Hashem alamadchem. I will teach you Yirah Shamayim." And the Chofetz Chaim asked the question: if you want people to listen to you, you have to say, "Bo bonim, come my children, come to me." Why does it say "L'chu bonim, go my children, and listen to me"? And the Chofetz Chaim said that people are supposed to be part of society. People are supposed to mingle with other people. I don't want people to become a hermit. He says, L'chu banim, go out into the world, and I'm going to tell you how you should speak to people. That's how he understood what it means L'chu banim. We all have to know how to speak to people. It's not what the Chofetz Chaim wanted, that we should be separate and not talk, just the opposite. L'chu banim, go my children, go into the world, become part of society, and I'm going to tell you how to speak. Now let's think about this a moment. When the Chofetz Chaim began writing the Sefer, it was almost 145 years ago. And he was devastated, as we said before, about the Lashon Hara that was spoken in the community. Let's think about it. How did people speak Lashon Hara in those days? They had to go to somebody's house, see somebody in the workplace, see somebody in shul. And yet, when people had to make the special effort to go and meet someone and then speak Lashon Hara, at that time the Chofetz Chaim was so devastated. Could you imagine how disturbed and upset he would be today? Today, with one press of a send button, an email, with texting, WhatsApp, with blogs, in seconds, dozens and dozens of people can hear the Lashon Hara that one person wants to send, and that person can forward it to others, and within minutes, thousands of people can hear how one person is being slandered, humiliated, and spoken against. Within moments, it can be in countries all over the world, across the date line. Could you imagine what the Chofetz Chaim would say today, if he were here today, to see how fast Lashon Hara can be spread? And you know something? Unfortunately, it doesn't resonate with most people. We know that Lashon Hara is wrong, but people say, hey, listen, come on. You don't have to talk. I've got to talk with my wife. I've got to talk with my kids. I've got to talk with my business associates. I've got to talk with people. I travel. I go all over. I've got to talk. So you can't just tell me not to talk. So people don't really take Lashon Hara as serious as they should. And they're pretty flippant about it. So I want to show you in a few ways how Lashon Hara just doesn't pay. You will see in a few moments that Lashon Hara just doesn't pay. Do you know that in Parshas Kiseitze there's a pasuk? And this is a pasuk that many people say every day. Chofetz Chaim says we should be saying this every day. And listen to what the Ramban writes on this pasuk. Dvorim Chav Daled pasuk Tes. Zochar es asher osa Hashem elekecha leMiriam. Remember what Hashem, your God, did to Miriam b'derech b'tzeischem in Mitzrayim, on the way when you left Mitzrayim. The Ramban points out that it is so important to remember what happened. He holds that it is one of the 613 mitzvahs. Zochar es asher osa Hashem elekecha leMiriam. And you know what the Ramban writes? The Ramban writes, she loved her brother. She didn't mean any harm. She was a tzaddikus. She spoke in private. And yet, v'chol maseha hatoivim loy ha'ila. All her great deeds that she did, Miriam was a tzaddikus, and it just didn't help. She was punished. She had saras. She was separated from the community. Millions of people had to wait for her a full week until they were able to go on. That was terrible humiliation. Imagine how she felt. Lashon Hara just doesn't pay. And I want to show you another thing. It's absolutely incredible. You know, the Chofetz Chaim says that when a person speaks Lashon Hara, he's not only hurting the person that he's slandering or humiliating or embarrassing, he's hurting themselves. And he hurts himself, and he brings an amazing proof from this. The Torah tells us who was the first one to speak Lashon Hara. That was the Nachash, the snake, the serpent, spoke against Hashem and spoke to Chava. Now, listen what the Torah tells us. Hashem was so angry at the Nachash, Vayomer Hashem Elokim El HaNachash. Hashem says to the Nachash, this is in Bereshis Gimel, Pasuk Yudalid, Ki azis azos, because you did this, Orur ato mikol habeima, you are cursed from all animals. Al gochain chatelech, you're going to have to go on your belly. Va'ofa toichal kol yemei chayecha, and you're going to eat dust and earth all your life. Says the Chofetz Chaim something remarkable. Just like the Nachash was punished with his sustenance, Chas v'sholom, a person who speaks Lashon Hara has to be careful, because also mi shehu bal Lashon Hara nenash ba'oini, a person Chas v'sholom can be punished with poverty, with his sustenance. So Lashon Hara doesn't pay. You know why? Because you're hurting yourself. You're hurting your own family. And just like the Nachash was punished with his sustenance, Chas v'sholom, the Chofetz Chaim is telling us, a person who speaks Lashon Hara could also be punished with his sustenance. And he says something amazing. He says, how many times do we go to Rebbes and we go to all these places to get all kinds of skulas? And we try to get a skula for parnasa, right? Everybody needs parnasa. And the Chofetz Chaim says, what do you got to get skulas for? You don't have to go to get skulas, because the biggest skula is not to talk Lashon Hara. If a person, Chas v'sholom, talks Lashon Hara, you see what happened with the Nachash. He was punished in his sustenance. You want to have parnasa? Be careful how you speak. That's the raya that he's bringing from the Torah. But here's another reason. You know, the Chofetz Chaim has a beautiful mashal. Imagine that you have a lake that is pristine. It's beautiful. The water is so clear. And you want to get the water from this lake to the community. So you got to have pipes. But what if the pipes are rotted, and the pipes are decayed, and the pipes are filthy? So the most beautiful water, when it gets to the community, it's going to be decayed. It's going to be spoiled. It's not going to be able to be drinkable. And if that's the case, Zok the Chofetz Chaim, if somebody is learning and he's making a connection with his mouth through the Torah to Hashem, or somebody's davening, so he's using that mouth. But that mouth, if it has spoken Lashon Hara or Rechilos, or caused machlokes, or caused somebody to get angry. So then that mouth is like those pipes that are dirty and filthy and decayed. And the Chofetz Chaim tells us it's so frightening when you think about this, because in mekalkel piv bishar diburim, if a man or a woman, anyone, is mekalkel, destroys their mouth, that's the vehicle from which words are coming from, but that's the same pipes that the Torah and Tefillah is coming, then, chas v'shalom, what happens? That loisala lamala calls man shaloi tekabel tshuva. It can't go up. The Tefillah, the Torah can't go up to Hashem in purity. Now, isn't that terrible? Imagine people learning, people davening, but it's not making its way up to Shemayim. And why is that? That is because it's like a filthy pipe or a rotted pipe. And you know something? There's an amazing Sefer HaChinuch. The Sefer HaChinuch in Vidui Meiser, Simen Tov Reish Zayin, 607, says like this. Lefi sheskulas ha'odam. What is the treasure of man? V'goydel shvachai, and the ultimate praise, the greatest praise of man, is dibur. How are we different than any other being, any other animal? It's only because we speak. They can move like we can move. They can eat, they sleep. The only difference is dibur. So we are elevated because of our dibur. That's why it makes sense that our Torah and Tefillah only comes through the mouth. Why? Because that's the most elevated part that we have. That's our greatest treasure. As a matter of fact, in the Igeres HaGra, in the letter that the Gra wrote before he was hoping to go to Eretz Yisrael, he has an expression, Ki hapeh kodesh kadoshim, your mouth is holy, the holiest of holies. So imagine that's why the Torah and the Tefillah go through that vehicle, which is the mouth. And so therefore, Nebuch, anybody uses their mouth in an improper way, they've got to do teshuvah. Because if they do not do teshuvah, then chas v'shalom, then the Torah and the Tefillah is not going to make it up there. So Lashon Hara doesn't pay. Imagine this. We all know that there are so many women today, wonderful women, who have Tehillim groups, Amen groups. Imagine a woman is saying Tehillim. She's there with 30, 40, 50 women. And they're saying Tehillim for Chaylim. And they're saying Tehillim for the situation in Eretz Yisrael. So their mouths are holy. They've davened Tehillim. Now a lady goes home. She gets a call. What do you think about this shidduch? Oh, that family's awful. They're so argumentative. Oh, they're terrible people. So all the Tehillim that she said, it's just not making its way up. Because she just spoiled it by saying something devastating. Now, here's another scenario. A guy, a bocher, is learning in the yeshiva, right? He's learning a first man. 4 hours, he's going strong. Rashi, Gemara, Tosfos, Mefarshim, everything. Beautiful. He comes to lunch, he's sitting with a chevra, and then one guy mentions the name. That guy, come on, he's a fool. He has no brains. He's not a nice person. He doesn't belong in the yeshiva. Oy vey. The guy learned 4 hours. But that's like the dirty pipe, the filthy pipe. It's not going up to Shemayim, because even though that he learned 4 hours, but the pipe that's making that connection to Hashem through that mouth, that's terrible. Here's another scenario. A businessman, middle of the day, he's in the middle of a business deal. Listen, I got to daven mincha. I'm sorry. I've got to make a connection. And the Gemara says mincha is so important. He stops everything in the middle of the day. He goes to an office where they have a minyan. Beautiful. He's davening mincha with kavanah. He comes back to the office. Somebody says something about his competitor, and he slaughters him. He's a cheat. He's a ganav. He's awful. So all the mincha that he davened, it's not making its way up. But you know, I'll tell you another place where the Yetzer Hara comes in. Rav Pam used to say that when a boy or a girl goes out and they feel it's not for them, they're not supposed to say to the shadchan, I'm not interested. What do you mean not interested? That's a human being. You don't talk like that about another human being, that you're not interested. It's not compatible. It's not for me. And I want to add something. I've spoken to so many people about this. There are many young men and many young women, when they come home from a date, they speak to their friends and they devastate and destroy the other person that they went out with. Maybe they were jilted. Maybe they were refused. You still can't say something negative about the girl you went out with. You still can't say something negative about the boy that you went out with. A guy says something negative about a girl, that girl's going to be for somebody. But maybe now she's not going to get a date for a few months because you said something terrible about her. And maybe the boy's not going to be able to get a date because the girl said he's not a conversationalist. He's so quiet, you can't get him to talk. Well, maybe some girls like a quiet boy. Just say it's not for you. And you know something? We have to know. It's very important in shidduchim. What to say, what not to say, what you must say, and what you're not allowed to say. When it comes to shidduchim, if you know that somebody has something that would ruin a marriage, you must say it when they ask you. The Yetzer Hara said, oh, I can't speak Lashon Hara. Right? The guy's talking Lashon Hara all day. But when it comes to shidduchim, no, I can't say that. But if that person, that boy or that girl has something that would destroy a marriage, you're obligated to say it. I'm not going to give any examples, because you all know what I'm talking about. Whether it's a medical issue, an anger issue, or somebody wants to go into somebody's business and you know the guy's a robber, a thief, dishonest. We have to learn these halachas. That's why we have to learn these halachas in Chofetz Chaim Heritage Foundation. So you should know what to say. Not that the Yetzer Hara is fooling you. Oh, you can't speak Lashon Hara. There's a time when you have to say. And you got to learn these halachas right now, before the questions are asked, so that you'll know how to be able to answer them properly. There is a wonderful place where all of us can get hadracha, we can get direction. The Chofetz Chaim Heritage Foundation printed a book called Daily Companion. At the end of that book, there are 16 pages of direction as far as what one should say and one may not say when it comes to shidduchim. Call the Chofetz Chaim Heritage Foundation or get the book Daily Companion and read those 16 pages. Let that become part of your life, so that the next time when you are asked about a shidduch, you'll know what to say according to halacha. I just want to add something very important. It's not just a question of learning the Sefer Chofetz Chaim and Shmiras HaLashon. Not everybody has the opportunity to do that. But what's most important when it comes to answering questions about shidduchim is to ask your Rav. Everybody has to ask these shailas from a knowledgeable Paysach, a Rav, somebody that has experience in these things, and they will be able to guide you about what you can say, what you must say, and what you shouldn't say. I once heard a great expression. It's never too late to become what you could have been. I love that expression. It's never too late to become what you could have been. In other words, you could always do teshuvah. And I don't want to leave this audience thinking that we're doomed. We're not doomed, because the Chofetz Chaim says like this: if a person is makadesh koyach hadibur, if a person makes up on this very day, on this day which is the saddest day of the year, on this day when we commemorate the Churbanos, because especially the second Churban, because of Sinas Chinam, and Sinas Chinam, the Chofetz Chaim says, obviously leads to so much Lashon Hara, but we can do teshuvah. We can be makadesh our words. We can elevate our language. And if that's the case, oz toirosoi v'tfilosoi yiskabel Milah. Then the Torah and Tefillah will go up, so you're not doomed. It's never too late to become what you could have been. We could all have been perfect people, speaking in a refined, elevated way. And if we do teshuvah, we make a commitment right now that we're going to change the way we speak, that we're going to curtail the way we speak about others, especially when we speak evil, and we'll try to stop it altogether. That's the teshuvah. Then the Torah and the Tefillah will be accepted. So what we have to do is we have to give each other tools. And I think if you accept any one of these things, you will see that your language patterns will change. Here's the first one. My brother Rabbi Kalman told me this. I could not believe it. I didn't learn in Lakewood, so I was never Yom Kippur in Lakewood. But you know what he told me? It's amazing. Rav Schneier Kotler, the Heilige Rosh Hashiva of Lakewood, at Ne'ilah, you know what his topic was? Shmiras HaLashon. He spoke about being careful how one speaks. And he said as follows. He quoted the Chofetz Chaim in the Sefer Chofetz Chaim, where he writes about the mitzvahs asay that somebody violates when they speak Lashon Hara, the mitzvah of Yahavta L'Recha Kamocha. And he says like this. The Chofetz Chaim says like this. Every one of us knows that we have faults. And the worst thing would be if we know that somebody knows our faults and they go and broadcast it to others. We wouldn't even want that they should broadcast it to one person out of 1,000, because we all know we've done things that we're not proud of, and we wouldn't want anybody to know that. We'd give everything. And if chas v'shalom somebody said it, we certainly don't want anybody else to accept it. So based on this, Rav Shnaya said, the next time you're about to speak to someone, about someone, imagine that person is standing right next to you and saying, please, please don't say what you're about to say. Please don't say that thing about me. Now, I think that if you would imagine this person standing next to you, you're certainly not going to say what you were going to say, that's for sure. And even if you do say something, you're not going to say it the way you were going to say it. That also curtails it. But that's perhaps the first tool. Imagine that the person that you are speaking about is standing next to you begging, please, please, don't say what you're about to say about me. Now here's the second thing. And you know, I was speaking recently to the Telzer Rosh Hashiva in Riverdale, Rabbi Avram Osband, and we were talking about this brilliant insight from Rabbi Chaim Shmulevitz, and he told me he was there in Eretz Yisrael when Rabbi Chaim said it. Listen to this. Rabbi Chaim Shmulevitz asks a great kasha. We know that the Torah tells us that the Yidden had to be in the Midbar 40 years. Why were they 40 years? Because the Meraglim were 40 days in Eretz Yisrael, and they spoke Lashon Hara against Eretz Yisrael. So it was Yom L'Shana. Every day that they were there, unfortunately, Klal Yisrael was punished for a year. Rabbi Chaim asked a great kasha. How many times did they say Lashon Hara? Once. When they came back, they spoke Lashon Hara once. So there should be a 1-year punishment. Why is there a punishment for 40 years? It's a great kasha. Here's the teretz, it's even greater than the kasha. And you know what Rav Chaim writes? He says, how did they come to speak Lashon Hara? He says it wasn't, the Aveira wasn't only the Dibur, Ela Ikar HaChet. The main aspect of the Chet was Beria, with the looking, the Histaklos, and the concentration, Shalahem al Eretz Yisrael. They looked Hamabot Hamaaves Vahashlili. They looked with a twisted and negative mind for 40 days on Eretz Yisrael. And when you look for the negative, and you look for something that's wrong, you're going to find it, and you're going to speak Lashon Hara, and that's what the Chet was. The Chet, only the Yesod of the Chet was their view of the negative. They were looking for the bad. And then the Toitzah, the outcome was the Lashon Hara. But the Lashon Hara was an outcome of 40 years of evil. 40 days of evil. 40 days of looking the wrong way. That's why Klal Yisrael was unfortunately punished for 40 years. So that's the second tool. The first tool is to imagine the person is standing next to you. And the second tool is always look for the good. And when you look at people that way, then you're going to speak good. You're not going to speak bad. And that leads us to the third tool. And it's interesting, the Chofetz Chaim himself speaks about that in the Sefer that he wrote, Shmiras HaLashon, Shar Beis, Perik Daled. Now, there's a pasuk in the Torah that most of us, when we would read the pasuk the first time, we would think this is being directed to people in the Bezdin, to people in a Jewish court. B'tzedek tishpoit amisecha, with righteousness you should judge your friend. That's in Vayikra Yutes, pasuk Tesvav. The next pasuk says, Loiselech rochil b'amecha. Don't go spreading rumors. Don't be a gossip monger in your nation. Rashi tells us that the first pasuk is not only talking about judges, it's talking about everybody. Judge everyone, lakav schus. That's the third tool. Sometimes you have to be creative, I'll admit. Sometimes you have to think, why did he do that? Well, I got to try to find a good reason why that person did that. B'tzedek tishpoit amisecha, everyone, don es chavercha lakav schus. That's what the Chofetz Chaim says. And if you look for the good and in an incident, all of a sudden it's going to be different. I want to show you something. Rabbi Yaakov Galinsky passed away just a few months ago. And he told an amazing story, just along these lines. He told a story that there was a family that wanted to be involved in Kiruv. So they called a Kiruv organization, and they asked, they said, could you send us some people, maybe for Shabbos or Friday night? We'd like to get involved in being Makariv people. So this Kiruv organization estimated, what type of people they are. They said, something, there's a doctor and his wife. They really want to become close to Yiddishkeit. We'll send them to you Friday night. And the meal went very well, and they were invited a second and a third time. Now, these people lived in an apartment house, and so when they said goodbye after the Suda Friday night, they walked them to the door, and the doctor and his wife walked down the stairs, and that was it. The fourth time that they were there, the host couple, they walked the doctor and his wife all the way downstairs. And they could not believe it. They start walking. They see the doctor and his wife walking. There's a taxi that comes. The guy flags down a taxi, and they get into the taxi. I couldn't believe it. We're trying to make Yeshem Shabbos. On our block, you take a taxi? Obviously, we're not reaching you, or you're not getting us. Forget it. They called the Shiur organization and said, listen, obviously we're not reaching them. If they could take a taxi on our block, and we just walked them down the stairs, get us somebody else. Fine. So they got him somebody else. Fine. A year later, the Shiur organization calls this couple and says, you know something? That doctor suddenly died. And that woman used to like to come to your house Friday night. Maybe you could go be Menachem Mohel, pay a shiva call. Oh, they were so sad that the doctor died. He's a nice man. Okay, they come to be Menachem Mohel. And as they're sitting and speaking there, they said, was your husband sick? And the woman said, no, he wasn't, but this time he didn't make it to the hospital on time. So what do you mean this time? See, he had a heart attack, but this time he just didn't get there on time so they could save him. See, the other time was, remember when we went to your house and we were walking down the stairs? My husband is a doctor. He realized that he was having a heart attack. So as soon as he went downstairs and he saw the cab, he flagged the cab. We went in and they rushed us to the hospital and they saved his life. Imagine that. These people didn't have a connection with these people for a full year afterwards. Why? Because they weren't Dan L'Kav Zchus. I admit it's not easy in that situation to be Dan L'Kav Zchus. But you always have to try to think, maybe there's something I don't know here. And because they didn't understand that there was a good reason why he got into the cab, they had no connection. Who knows how much kirov was lost because of that. And that's the third tool, always judging a person L'Kav Zchus. Here's the fourth one. And again, the Chofetz Chaim talks about this. He talks about this again in Shmir Saloshin, the Sefer, Sharbeiz, Perikei. The fourth way is Avas Yisrael. Love Jews. Do you know, I'm going to show you now different ways how people who love Jews use their words to make these people feel like $1 million. And that's what you can do with words. You can build people. You can make people feel special. Listen to this story. This story happened in Manchester with Rabbi Yehuda Zev Segal, who was so instrumental in the Chofetz Chaim Heritage Foundation. So the Rosh Hashiva is in his house one night, and somebody calls and says that a girl in Manchester became a kala. She's on the phone with her father, and they would like to get a bracha from the Rosh Hashiva. So the boy who answered the phone tells the Rosh Hashiva. Rosh Hashiva says, tell them I'll call them back in 10, 15 minutes. He calls back in 10 or 15 minutes. Now the Rosh Hashiva knew that this kala had an older sister that was not yet engaged or married. So he asks to speak to the older sister. And he says, I want to give you a bracha. I want to tell you how special you are. That you did not stand in the way so that your younger sister would be able to get engaged. Hashem should bench you in that zchus, that you should be zeichet to find the right shidduch soon, and you'll build a bayis neman b'Yisrael. And the Rosh Hashiva was such a warm person, and this girl was crying on the phone. She was so touched by the Rosh Hashiva's bracha. And then the Rosh Hashiva said, now could I speak to the kala? And he spoke to the kala, and of course he gave her a warm bracha as well. So when he got off the phone, the bacher said to him, Rebbe, why didn't you answer the phone in the beginning? Why did you wait 10, 15 minutes to make the call? Listen to what he said. He said, if I would have gone on the phone the first time with the kala, and then I would speak to the older sister wouldn't feel that choshev. She would feel she was just an addendum to the story. But when I made the call, and I asked for her first, that made her feel special. And I just want to say, I am positive of the 50,000 people that are watching this video, there are many older girls who have given permission for their younger sisters to get married. And I am positive that I speak in the name of Rav Segal, that you should all be blessed, and you should all have a bracha, and you should all be able to find your zivug and build a bayis neman, because what you're doing is the right thing. And Hashem sees that. And in the heilige zchus of the bracha that Rav Segal gave to that older girl in Manchester, I'm sure in Shemayim, he's giving you the same bracha that you should be able to find your richtige zivug. Now listen to this. Here's a second one. I love this. It's amazing. There's a menahel, a principal in Lakewood, in the yeshiva called Orchos Chaim. This man, his name is Rabbi Avram Mandelbaum. He just told me the story a couple weeks ago. And he said it like this. He's got Kenai Nahara on Lakewood. There are many, many children in the school. In the 4th and 5th grade, where he's the Manayil, I think they have 300 kids alone. So there are boys sometimes that are sent out of class, and, he has to give them Musar. So he told me every time before he gives the little boy a note to go back to his class, he always says, "Don't forget, Yossi, I love you," which is so beautiful. Even though he had to rebuke the child and give him Musar, he tells the kid he loves him. So just a few weeks ago, there was a little boy, very mischievous kid, who's been to this office quite a few times. And of course, the Menayel, Rabbi Mandelbaum, recognized him right away. And he gave him his Musar. And then he writes him out a note. And he says, "You can go back to class." And Rabbi Mandelbaum told me that he noticed the kid was standing outside the door. He wasn't going back to class. So he said to the little boy, "Is everything okay? How come you're not going back to class?" The little boy looks up. It says, "Rebbe, you forgot to tell me you love me. You forgot to tell me you love me." That's amazing. You think you tell a little boy, "Don't forget I love you," it doesn't mean anything? I guarantee you, in 30 years, that boy will not remember one word that he learned in the 4th or 5th grade, but he will remember that the Rebbe always told him he loved him. That's special. That's what we can do with words. That's what Lashon Tov is all about. We have to become people that love Yidden. And when you love a Yid, you're not going to say anything bad about that person. Words have to build people, not break people. Words have to help people, not hinder people. Words have to be constructive, not destructive. Words have to elevate, not denigrate. You know, we quoted before from the letter of the Vilna Gaon. He was hoping that he would go to Eretz Yisrael. Listen to how he writes to his mother, to his wife, and his mother-in-law. His wife and his mother, rather. That's her mother-in-law. So he's writing now to his own wife and to his mother. He writes like this: "V'gam le'imi," and to my mother, "Bakoshasi, I plead with you. Shehei sholem ben shnechem, let there be peace between my wife and you, my mother. Ve'isha es ru'ua tismach b'dvarim tovim." Say wonderful things to each other. Make each other happy. Now listen to this. Kizeh mitzvah gedoyla l'chol adam. This is a great mitzvah for everyone. V'shoyalin la'adam b'shas adin. At the end of 120, you're going to be asked, "Himlachta es chavercha?" Did you make your friend feel like a king or a queen? B'nachas ruach? That's amazing. Harei zeh shetzorich sheyam l'cheu. Words have to build people. We have to refocus. We have to think on this, the saddest day of the year. We have to think that sinas chinam causes lashon hara. And as Rav Pam said, words are not hefker. Words have to be elevated. That's what the Goyen is saying. It's not just a question of social graces. We have to make that other person feel special. That's what he was saying to his wife and to his mother. So I say, let us make a commitment on this day. Let us make a commitment that we're going to accentuate the positive and look away from the negative. And I just want to end just with these two beautiful stories and a great thought. There's a great community, a Torah community in Gateshead. And there was a young man who was learning in Gateshead for 3 years. And then he decided he's going to learn in Eretz Yisrael. So he comes to, before he left, they made what's called a Sudas Preda, a goodbye party. And at the goodbye party, his Chavrusa spoke, the Mashgiach spoke, and then this boy spoke. Now, he was a Lebedika boy. Everybody knew that his speech would be special. But nobody could imagine just how special it would be. And this is what he said. He said, "We all know that our Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Avram Gurewitz, is a great Talmud Chacham." He says, but many perhaps don't realize what kind of great Bal Midas he really is. And he turns to the Rosh Yeshiva who's sitting there. He says, "Rosh Yeshiva, I want to tell you a story now. And maybe till this day you don't know that I was the one that was involved in this story with you." And he tells the story that when he came to Gateshead 3 years earlier, he didn't know anybody. He had maybe 1 or 2 people that he knew. But after 1 or 2 days, he got into a fight with 2 people. And they started chasing him. That was lunchtime. So he didn't know where to run. He figured to run in the Beis Medrash. Maybe nobody's in the Beis Medrash lunchtime. He can hide in there. But there were a lot of people learning this, so he had to get out of there. But these guys were chasing him from behind. So he ran to the Oitzah Asfarim, to the library in the back. There's a little alleyway. You go into the library. The door has no windows. And he slammed the door. And these guys are banging on the door. Let us in, let us in. And he says, what are you, crazy? You guys, I'm going to let you in. You're trying to beat me up? Get out of here. Okay. He's there a few minutes. And then there's a knock. A soft knock. He says, who is it? A voice says, it's the Rosh Hashiva. Yeah, you're the Rosh Hashiva. You're not the Rosh Hashiva. And the voice says, I need a sefer. So you don't need a sefer. You guys, you're trying to beat me up. Get out of here, you guys. Stop imitating the Rosh Hashiva. Okay. A few minutes later, there's another knock, very soft. He says, who is it? I said, it's the Rosh Hashiva. Get out of here, come on. He says, I need a sefer. Come on, you're not Moretz. You don't need no svarim. You guys are just trying to beat me up. Get out of here. I want to get out. 2 minutes later, there was another knock, and now he began to realize, oh my heavens, maybe it really is the Rosh Hashiva. So he opens the door slowly, and he sees Rabbi Avram Gurewitz standing like this, so he shouldn't see the face of the boy. Rabbi Avram Gurewitz, the Rosh Hashiva, walks into the library, and this kid runs out of there. And he says, Rosh Hashiva, you didn't know till this day that it was me. And I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, because if you would have seen my face, and I would have known that you knew that I spoke to you that way, I would have left the yeshiva the next morning, and I wouldn't have the 3 great years of learning. What is the greatness of this story? The greatness of this story is that the Heilige Rosh Hashiva did not look for the bad. Of course that boy deserved rebuke. How do you talk like that? But the Rosh Hashiva looked at the Kafschus. Maybe he doesn't realize it's really me. And he didn't look for the bad. And that's the lesson we have to learn. Not to look for the bad. And hopefully Hashem in turn will not look for the bad in each and every one of us. But now listen to this story. Absolutely incredible. There was a Rebbe that was giving a test to a classroom. And he's giving the test. There's 25 boys in the classroom. And he notices that one of the boys has a little crib sheet. And he's looking at the crib sheet. And every time he looks at the crib sheet, he writes down an answer. The Rebbe couldn't believe it. This kid is cheating. The Rebbe was so incensed. How could this kid dare cheat on this test? He was going to grab away the paper, make a big X on it, but somehow he controlled himself. And he didn't do it. He watches this boy constantly. Every other minute, the kid is looking at the sheet, and he writes down the answer. He couldn't get over it. Fine. At the end of the test, when all the boys had left the class, he says to this boy, please stay. He sits him down by a desk. He says, did you study for this test? He said, Rebbe, yeah, of course I studied for the test. He said, you really studied? You know all the answers? He said, yeah, I do. He says, let me ask you some questions. And he asks him one question after the other, and the kid knows all the answers. He says, I don't understand. Why were you cheating? He says, Rebbe, I wasn't cheating. He said, what are you talking about? I saw you. You had this little sheet. You looked at it, and I even saw after the test. You put it in your pocket. The paper is right there. What do you mean you're telling me you didn't cheat? The boy looks up sadly at the Rebbe, and he says like this. He says, Rebbe, you know I don't usually get good marks on tests. Tests frighten me. And even an answer that I know, somehow I can't get it out of my mind to put it down on paper. But do you remember the last report card? After you wrote the marks on the report card, you wrote a note to my parents. And this is what you wrote. Yankee's cheerful demeanor and friendly personality make him a class leader. With his effort and enthusiastic learning, he will grow into a Talmud Chacham. Rebbe, that's what I had on the sheet. Because if you believe in me, I believe in me. And every time I looked at the sheet, it made me relax, and I was able to write the answer. Could you imagine? Imagine what the Rebbe, how he could have hurt that child if he would have grabbed the paper. But I think there's another lesson. Look what the Rebbe accomplished with these Heilige words, making the boy feel special. And that gave him the confidence so that he could get every answer right. We all know people that need encouragement. We all know people that need chizuk. This little boy, he lived, and he was living off the words that his Rebbe wrote on the report card. How many people do we know that have to be told, I love you, you're wonderful, you're special, you're kind, you have so much that you could accomplish? Perhaps when you finish watching this video, think about it. Think about some people that you haven't spoken to in a while that really need encouragement. We all need encouragement. Everybody wants to be loved. Everybody wants to be validated. And these words that the Rebbe wrote on that report card, they validated this child. That gave him the confidence so he should be able to know the answers. And if we can learn that lesson to validate and encourage and build people, we will have undone so much sinas chinam. We'll have avas chinam. We'll love other people just for the fact that they are fellow Yidden. And we'll be able to build them so they feel good about themselves and be able to live to their potential. I just want to end with this fabulous thought. You know, there's such a sad medrash. If you learn it, it's impossible not to cry. I remember when I was a counselor in Camp Aguda many years, Rav Yaakov Tarabam, Zecher Tzadik Levrocha, he would learn this medrash with all of us, with all of the staff, and he cried, and everybody cried. It's the Hagdama, the introduction to the medrash of Eicha. It's a very, very, very long introduction. He only learned part of it. It's called Psichta de Eicha Rabasi Perik Chavdalet. And it tells us, B'shah ba'oisa shah, at that time, when the Beis HaMikdash was burning, HaKadosh Baruch Hu boicha, Hashem was crying, V'omer, and he said, Oili al beisi, woe is to me on my home, Bonai, my children, Heichon atem, where are you? Koyanai, my koyanim, Heichon atem, where are you? Oyavai, my beloved children, Heichon atem, where are you? Mo esalachem, what can I do for you? Hisreisi bachem, I warned you. V'loi chazarti b'teshuvah, and you didn't do teshuvah. On this day of TishaBav, Hashem himself has said, as the Medrash tells us, Hashem himself cried when he saw the Churban Bayis. And of course we all cry as well, because we long for those days when we could have the Beis HaMikdash back. But you know, there's a wonderful sefer, the Me'or Einayim, who says something incredible. He says, Hashem loves every Jew. Hashem finds pleasure in every Jew. And the word for pleasure in Hebrew is oineg, ayin, nun, gimel. And he says, what happens when somebody speaks Lashon Hara against another Jew? All of a sudden, that joy is mitigated. It takes away Hashem's joy because you're speaking bad about another person. So what does Hashem do? Hashem takes that word, oineg, and he switches around the letters. It's nun, gimel, ayin. It's a nega. That's the imperfection that Hashem puts on the person who's speaking Lashon Hara. Because that person took away the oineg, and he made Hashem sad, kaviyachol, so Hashem gives a nega on that person's wall, in the houses, the skin, whatever. So my Rebbe, Rabbi David Cohen, said something fabulous. He said, on Tisha B'Av, if we make up our minds not to speak Lashon Hara, if we make up to curtail the way we speak about others, then the nega won't be there. So if the nega is not going to be there, the oineg will be there. The joy, the happiness of Hashem. And that's what we have to do today. On this sad day, let's make a commitment that we will make sure that Hashem will not have to put a nega in any way, in any form in our lives. But rather we will give him pleasure, oineg, because we'll curtail the way we speak about others. And if we bring oineg to Hashem, hopefully in turn, he'll bring us the greatest joy by bringing Mashiach in our time. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for listening.